it doesn't get any bigger. You are in Chicago with Michael Jordan, and then
right.
of course you go out in the street, and I'm telling you this because I know you know.
Yeah.
But Ivan was talking about you then.
Could you say your last name?
You know,
Mike, please?
I certainly will say my last name. It's Brian Linehan, Linehan. Irish name, Toronto, Canada.
There you go. You know, I almost worked in Toronto.
During the interview, just
Oh, sure, thanks, okay.
go ahead.
The motion picture is Private Parts. The star is Howard Stern. I sat down, I shook hands, and you said, I almost worked in Toronto.
It's true. When I was in Detroit and my station went country, which was a real bad time in my life, I got an offer. Was the station Chum FM? Yeah, that was the station. I was in touch with the program director there, and he said to me, he called me up and he said, I've heard about you. I've heard what you're doing in Detroit. I think you'd be good here. And he offered me a job. And I said, do I get paid in American money or Canadian money? He said, Canadian money. I said, wow, that's such a major commitment. Wow, that's a whole different world. I was like, my hands were shaking. And I actually thought very seriously about moving there. I thought it would have been a good place for me, but I went to Washington, D.C. Sort of my goal was to get to New York, so it seemed like I was getting geographically closer. So that's why I went that way.
Now, Howard, you know that I know that you found out what the Canadian dollar was worth.
Yes. Yes.
Let's not make
I ran out of town.
artistic. You found out the Canadian dollar wasn't worth $1, right?
I found out, you know what, you're absolutely right. I found out, wait a second, this is not such a good way to make a living. No, it just freaked me out. It was like, it hit me that it was a whole nother country, you know? I was like, wow, I was doing radio in another country. And also, you know, I said, gee, would it go over there? And I said, of course it would go over there. I mean, you know, I think my act would go over anywhere. I'm actually quite disappointed that I'm not on the radio in Canada at this point. The show's available for syndication. I think the government's pretty controlling there and pretty uptight about what goes on. Is that true?
Have you been told that?
I've been told that by a couple of Canadian journalists. Now, I don't know if they're telling me the truth, but it sounds to me like there might be something to that.
I would say in front of you, honestly, that there are Canadians who are on-air personalities in terms of radio and television who may be doing a variation on Howard Stern because of the success you've had with what you call your act.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that one of the reasons I'm still in radio, it frustrates me that there are so many guys out there stealing my personality. They're actually doing what I do and getting credit for it. That somewhere in Canada there's a guy, you know, the Bob and Jaime show or whatever his name is sitting there having this team that's basically listening to the tapes of my show and ripping it off. And I've noticed that whenever I go into a new market, because I'm constantly starting new markets, we shoot to #1 because I think when you're the original, when you're the originator, somehow people get hip to that. They understand it, and I think I'll always win out. So one day I will come to Canada, and I will be successful there, if it kills me.
Well, now, of course, you have Ivan Reitman. Speaking of Canadian content in Private Parts, the movie,
Yes.
will you tell us, what did Ivan Reitman, as a producer who believed in you and was a fan of Howard Stern before this movie, what did Ivan Reitman bring to this project that made it a reality when for 4 years no one else and no one else's script could?
This movie was long in the making. When I wrote my book, I never imagined it would be a Hollywood film. Absolutely could not imagine. It was one of the most difficult things I ever did, to write a book. And when it was done, Hollywood came knocking, and they said, we're going to turn this into a movie. And I said, how? I don't see how you can do it. So I signed with a studio, and I went through, I was smart. I had script approval. That was the one smart thing I did. I went through 22 scripts over a 2-year period, and they would come to me and said, you know, you cost us millions of dollars. Why are you doing this? You know you're afraid to make this picture. You're scared. I said, I'm not scared to do anything. I said, I'm the guy who flew down on MTV and bared his butt cheeks to the world, and they're not pretty. I said, I'm not afraid of anything. I said, I'm afraid of doing a bad movie if I'm afraid of anything. And these movies are bad. And as many millions as you've spent developing this script, it's going to cost you more to make this movie, and it's going to be a bomb. It's going to be horrible. It's not going to be funny. It's not going to be touching. It's not going to be real. And these scripts were over the top. I mean, I'd come home from work, Richard Simmons, the exercise guru, is running through my house, babysitting my kids, and yelling at me. I said, who wants to see this? I am so sick of these comedies that have been coming out. Everything's a bad Saturday Night Live sketch. Coneheads. You've got these movies that mean nothing to people, that don't touch them. There's no storyline. The cast of Friends is making movies now, and they're the same character in Friends that they are in the movies. There really hasn't been too many good comedies. And I said, I have an idea in my head what the tone of this thing should be. And you guys aren't hitting it with these scripts. I can't tell you how to do it. I'm not a screenwriter, but I know you're not hitting it. Well, I was lucky that Ivan Reitman was a fan of my radio show, and he was also a fan of the book. I had done some interviews with him on my radio show. And I called him up and I said, look, I mean, certainly you don't have to do this for me, but would you read these scripts and just tell me, am I crazy? I think these are bad scripts. And who do you respect more than Ivan? I mean, Ghostbusters, Twins, Animal House, Meatballs, Stripes, you name it. He read the scripts and he said, you're absolutely right. If you do these movies, you will be the laughing stock of the world. They will not make money. Your instincts are correct. He says, here's how I would make the movie. And he started to lay it out. And I mean, in a stroke of brilliance, he would just, like in one sort of like an epiphany, I mean, he would just see the movie. I said, boy, I wish you were the producer. Well, when my contract ran out with this studio, I could move the whole thing over. Ivan took it over. Ivan said, I'm going to go off for 6 months with the writer, Lenny Bloom, who wrote Meatballs and Stripes, and we're going to work on this film. And 6 months later, he came back and he said to me, this script is 60% done. What do you think of it? And I look at it and I go, I would do this in a minute. This script is perfect. It reflects who I am. It's the true story of my life. It was Rocky-esque in a way because it captured what I thought was the most interesting aspects of my book. The fact that I was a loser, that my father called me a moron, that when I went on the radio, even though I had certainly no experience at it, and I couldn't catch my breath. I mean, I was so nervous when I went on the radio that my voice would go up here. I'd sound like Kermit the Frog. You know, I was just, I was a mess. And I'd get on the air and I was awful. And yet somehow through, I don't know, some sort of grand design, I don't know what it is, I understood that I had to do something different to succeed in radio. And as soon as I understood what it was that I had to do differently, if I went on the air and did lesbian dating game or something wild like that, a general manager would grab me, pull me into his office, shake me down, and say, you cost us half our advertising, we're going to fire you. And to me, what was revealing was how I dealt with management also. Not just the wacky bits that I did on the radio, but how I dealt with management. I think that's what kept me in radio, that I could sit down rationally with these guys and say, look, I'm not a bad person. I'm not insane. I understand that what your concerns are. And then 2 seconds later, go back on the radio and screw them again. So this process over and over again somehow kept me in there until the ratings would come in and the show would take off. And for years, the most asked question of me was, what kind of woman would marry Howard Stern? And this to me was fascinating because the content of my show is sexual, sometimes, a lot of times. It's, I reveal everything about my personal life, which included my wife, talking about her miscarriage. And she saw this as betrayal. And yet I still had this compulsion to tell everything. And some people see that as a betrayal, and they say, well, so why doesn't she leave him? And I think somehow you see the humanity of our relationship. You see that she's the backbone of my life, and that and we have a true friendship, and that there is a lot of humanity there, that there's a wonderful sort of love story going on here. So I have found now that when the press has come in and interviewed me, they go, I cannot believe this is a love story, and that we're touched by it, and I really had no idea what you were like off the radio, and I sort of get you a little bit better now.
Howard, you didn't need the press to come in and tell you that. You sat in the back of a theater in Seattle. You sat in the back of a theater in San Jose. These are not Howard Stern markets. You are not number one with a bullet in those markets.
Right.
Paramount and Reicher, with Ivan Reitman, put $20 million into this. That's considered, as we reach the millennium, low budget.
Yeah, can you believe that?
And in the back of those theaters in Seattle and San Jose, you already knew.
Those 2 nights are probably the most magical nights of my life. I had never seen this movie with an audience. I had no idea what the reaction was going to be. I believed it was a good film. I had hoped for the best, and I wanted people to leave saying it was funny. So I sit down in these theaters, and my hands were shaking. I'm not kidding. I don't get nervous by much, but this was pretty heavy. And the theater is packed with people, real people who eat popcorn during a movie, And they have cards, and they fill out little cards afterwards. I had no idea what a test screening was. And we're sitting there, and I'm watching, and I'm listening to them laugh, and they broke into applause 23 times. 23 times. When's the last time I went to a movie people started applauding? Like they'd be laughing, and all of a sudden they go, and I'm sitting there, Ivan, and I'm going, I don't believe this. This is great, but who knows? So they stick you in a back room afterwards. You talk about magic. The guy from Paramount walks in the research company, and their hands are shaking. They go, this is the highest testing movie in Paramount history. You tested higher than Forrest Gump and Indiana Jones. And I said, you're kidding. And Ivan turns to me, he says, you don't understand. I've done 15 movies. I've never had a test this high. And I'm going, you're kidding. He goes, remember this moment, because it's never going to happen again. This is an impossible moment. First time out of the box, you hit a home run. And then they give you the sheets to read, what people write down. They said, this is the funniest movie I've ever seen. It touched me, and it inspired me to follow my dreams. And Hilarious I had hoped for, inspiring somebody's dreams I never could have imagined. I even get chills right now thinking about it, because to me to make a film is probably the highlight of my life. I just never expected it to happen to me. But to hit such a home run with these test audiences, and for people at Paramount to be this excited about it. Sherry Lansing, the head of Paramount, called me up and just said, she was there for the test screening, and she called me up afterwards. She said, I'm telling you, it's my favorite film. I've never seen a movie do this good.
If she means it, Howard, she'll send you her underwear.
Is that true? Well,
You know
I'm
Sherry.
happy to say I got a dozen panties in the mail the other day from Sherry. No, that's not true. She'll send me her underwear. What do you mean by that? What do you know about her that I don't know?
Enough about Ivan Reitman being a genius. Let me tell you something about Betty Thomas, your director.
Yes.
There are those in the industry, Howard, who think that Betty Thomas was the only person to direct you in this movie. Number one, she dealt with Ed Marinaro all those years, who she said was an affectionate, sexist pig.
There you go.
She has been a school teacher. She did play a cop.
Yes.
She is 6'1". She survived a television sitcom with Don Rickles.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't Betty Thomas direct Howard Stern? And yet you found a rapport with this woman as a filmmaker that was a surprise to both of you.
First of all, never having been in a film before, and this is going back to Ivan. Ivan said Betty Thomas will be the perfect director for you. And when I met Betty, I understood why. I don't know if it's the nature of men and women, but I have had my best collaborations with women. Women I work with on the air, Robin Quivers, the woman who edited my book, Judith Regan, the woman responsible for my television show, Fran Shea. These are all mentors. I mean, these are people who showed me the ropes. And I was green when I went into this movie business. And Betty was willing to work with a non-actor and work with actors and be very experimental. But I'll give you a couple of clues why I think Betty did a phenomenal job. I'm very pleased with my own performance in this. People have come up to me and said, wow, you did a good job acting, real good job. And I credit Betty for this entirely. She calmed me down. The first day I told you on the set, I was a nervous wreck. She not only calmed me down, but there were times I would turn to her and I'd say, Betty, it doesn't feel real to me. You know, I certainly was not an actor in the traditional sense. I didn't have any training. And I'd say, but the scene doesn't feel real to me. And I'd say, how would you do it? How would you do this scene? And she'd say to me, I don't know. Now, I thought this was a great answer, because I think most guys in directing would go, I know the answer. I'm going to tell you how to do it, and I want you to do this and that. And I don't think I would have gotten a performance that way, because I wouldn't have put any thought into it. I would have mimicked whatever they told me. And Betty was saying to me, let's explore this together. And suddenly, all this heavy weight of carrying a motion picture lifted off my shoulders. I realized that there was no right answer. And there were times that I'd be doing a scene. I'm doing a scene with my wife, Mary McCormick, who plays my wife, and we're sitting at this table, and she tells me she's pregnant. And I remember that moment when my wife told me she was pregnant. It's a wonderful moment. I go, what? You know, whatever that reaction is. And I couldn't get it right. It didn't seem real to me. It seemed like I was acting. Betty walks over to me and whispers something. She goes, you know, I have, some people might be freaked out by this. She goes, I didn't want to tell you this during the shooting of the movie, but I have ovarian cancer. I went, well, what? She goes, did you just see how you reacted to that? I mean, did you just see how I startled you? This is the news you heard for the first time? I went, yeah. She goes, that's the reaction you have to have. And it became so clear to me what I had to do that it all began to get real. And I think that just those little sort of, her attitude, her spirit of collaboration, I'd walk in some days and she'd say to me, okay, we're doing this scene. I said, Betty, I got great ideas for this scene. I want to do this, this, and this. I want to change it around. She'd say to me, fine. You give me what's on the page one time and then go wild. Do whatever you want. And that kind of freedom, you know, that experimental attitude is what I think made the film great. She is so gifted and talented.
Howard, I sit in front of you, having just met you for the first time, knowing that this motion picture should work in any theater, in any city in the world. At the same time, you are now a rich, famous man. You are a husband and the father of 3 daughters. Is it still important, if I may paraphrase you, to spit in the face of every jerk-off in Hollywood who said, I wouldn't make it, I couldn't do it, I can't have it? Do you really, quote, consider everyone in Hollywood an asshole who wants you to fail and does not want this movie to succeed?
Maybe it's a character flaw, I don't know, but I still very much feel that way. I do not feel famous, I do not feel successful, and maybe that's what keeps me going. I often think that, like, you know, Quentin Tarantino made Pulp Fiction, and now we never hear from him again. It's almost like he got caught up in the moment. He goes, hey, I made Pulp Fiction, now I'll go to parties the rest of my life and say I swear to you, if I'm signing 25,000 books or whatever it is, I don't get carried away with the moment. I don't feel like I'm anything special. I always kind of feel like a piece of garbage.
Howard, at what point do you enjoy it?
I don't enjoy it necessarily. I don't sit there and revel in it. I don't go, wow, look at all the things I've done. I don't feel all that special. Right now, I got to admit, I feel totally vindicated because I know there are people in Hollywood, getting back to your original point, who think I'm a jerk, who don't, they don't really listen to the show. They listen with half an ear and they think that there's no intelligence or wit behind the program. And now that even people are coming out of this saying, wow, this is a really great film, I do feel vindicated. I do feel good that I can say to my father, I'm not a moron. I can say to those people in Hollywood who are afraid to do business with me, look what we did. We created a good film. Will it do a lot of business at the box office? I don't know, but I know we created a good film. And if it does a lot of business at the box office and it becomes a big smash hit, I will feel that sense of retribution. You know what I mean? And I don't know why. That just fuels me.
Howard, Betty Thomas wants you to star with Eddie Murphy in the remake of Dr. Dolittle. You might be able to take Allison and the girls to the island of St. Lucia if they go back to the behind. Ivan Reitman wants you to star in his next movie. Everybody, the jungle drums are beating, Howard. You're a movie star.
Well, that's hard to believe. If this is the face of Hollywood, God help us. But I got to tell you something. I used to say to Betty at the beginning of this film, I said, Betty, do you think I'm a good actor? Do you think that I could be in other films? And she'd say, you know what, I don't know. She said, at the end of the film, I'll tell you. Last day of shooting, she walked up and said, I'm going to be in the Eddie Murphy, I'm doing another project with Eddie Murphy. I'd like you to be in it. Now, that meant to me that she thought I had done a good job acting. And when Ivan sat me down in his office, and this is some office, I mean, I guess it's when you make Ghostbusters and Twins, you get a big office. And he handed me a script and he said, this is the movie you should star in next. That was all of the positive reinforcement I needed. I really felt like I could act because these people were saying to me, I believe in you and I think you did a good job acting. That's exciting to me. And I would make another film in a second as long as I had a good script. I would wait 10 years before I did another film if I didn't believe in the script. And I'm fortunate. I've got this radio show. It allows me to be patient for 4 years. Believe me, in that 4 years, I wanted to just go film a movie just because it was so exciting. But I was patient, and I held out, and I think I did the right thing. And I think if I make a second picture, I should put the same quality control into it. And I would.
Do you accept my telling you to your face that the reason your performance in Private Parts is so good beyond the reality of playing yourself, which is the most difficult role any of us can undertake in our lives?
Yes.
It's like walk that straight line.
Yeah.
Be yourself. Is that what you've been doing for over 20 years has been an act, it is a performance, and you've proven what a good actor you are. I think you're such a dichotomy that the moment you sit in front of a mic, you're actor's studio. You're more actor's studio than most of the people we talk about in interview about acting. And that's why when you go home, you go to the basement and you don't want to go out. You look at videos.
Well, I disagree with one thing that you said. The acting occurs in my real life when I'm off mic. I know when I'm on mic, that's the real me. I know it, that's the man that is in my head that wants to get out. And I know that right now you're having an internal dialogue in your head, I'm having an internal dialogue. That's who we really are. And when I get on that mic, I know that's really me. When I go home, when I'm with my boss, whatever it is I'm doing the rest of the day, I feel like I'm a hypocrite and a liar. I feel like I'm not telling the truth. I feel like I'm acting there. So if I am a good actor, I'm acting 20 hours a day. It's 4 hours a day that I'm not. And that is weird to say, and that is a dichotomy. In fact, my wife often says I'm living with two different people. And Mary McCormick, who played my wife, said, think about this woman's life. She lives with this one guy. I can go on the air, and I can tell my audience that I pleasure myself at night. I then go home to my wife. My wife hears the radio show, and she says, tell me something. Do you really do this at night? Do you please yourself sexually? I go, no, I don't. I'm lying to her. She goes, but I heard you say on the radio. I go, oh, I was lying to my audience. I go on, now I'm telling the truth to my audience. But I'm play acting in front of my wife. And then it gets weird. If she saw this interview we were doing, she says, wait a second, you just told that guy you do pleasure yourself. Then she said, wait a second, are you doing it? I go, no, honey, I'm not. So it's like we have to hide everything in real life. And that radio show is so liberating and freeing that that's where reality is for me.
Howard Stern, Canada awaits you on behalf of my country and my government. Give them another chance. Maybe they'll give you American dollars, or you get loonies or silver dollars.
I don't want American dollars. I want Canadian dollars. In fact, I just want the opportunity to broadcast in Canada. I am ready.
Ivan Reitman will help you, and he's a friend of Anne Murray's. It will be done, and Wayne Gretzky will co-sign.
Excellent.
Thank you.
I am ready. Great. Thank you. Enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Great interview.
Thank you.
Yeah, really great.
My pleasure.